Welcome back to the Hive. I'm Cammie.
And I'm Caleb.
And we're
the
the Beesons. All right. So for this episode, we are going to be talking about finances and living debt-free. And I know a lot of people, when you hear that topic or subject, are like, ugh, like that sounds so boring. But I promise you, it is not. We make it fun, and we actually, which we'll get into here in a second, but we teach Dave Ramsey the course, the Financial Peace University course at our church. We have taught several of those classes before and helped numerous people get through their debt journey. And so we love helping others. We have lived debt free for most of our marriage, and it's just something we're very passionate about. So we will chat about that here in a second, but first we're going to just kind of catch up on what we did over the weekend.
Well, it's football season, baby. That's what my weekend consisted of. Some K-State football on Saturday. Some
watching this time.
Watching. I didn't go this week, but watched on TV this week, and I didn't want to sit in 93-degree heat again after I just did that the previous week. And so didn't make the trip to Manhattan this week, but then watched some NFL football on Sunday for a large chunk of the day. This is Cammie's favorite time of year. She
love it so
she
much.
Loves when my weekends are filled with football. Yeah. But fantasy football, college football, NFL, it's the best time of year.
Mm-hmm. Well, you forgot Friday night. We did go over to some friends' house on Friday night and hang out and had a good time. And we're there later than the kids' bedtime, which usually happens. But they're having so much, well, at least Bridger's not really playing yet with other kids, but Ren is having so much fun with all of the other kiddos, and so she's not a problem to keep up past her bedtime, and we are always chatting with friends, and so we love going over and we hang out and have supper and just have a good time.
Yeah, overall the kids did well, even though they were past their bedtime, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, but yep, and then just kind of, well, we did go to a birthday party on Saturday then amongst the football games, and then Sunday, pretty much just had church, came home, and just watched football. And we did go for a walk. It was nice out, so we did a little walk.
And then today is the opposite weather. It was nice all weekend long, and then today it's just been torrential downpours, literally from like 7 this morning till this current time when we're recording. It's just been raining cats and dogs, and so which we needed it. We didn't get like any rain in August, and so it's nice to get a little bit of moisture finally. And it's fall temperatures. We opened the windows up today. It's like the high was like 67 today, I think, and so got to open the windows up, get the house to breathe a little bit.
Yeah,
so
it's been chilly in the house, honestly. I had like shut some windows because it was getting a little cool for me personally. Got down to like 70, 71 in the house, and that's too cold for me.
Keyword for Cammie, for me, because she is always freezing cold. It can be middle of summer and she's cold. For me, I'm always hot. It'll be the middle of winter and I'm still burning up. And so she is very cold-bodied and I'm very warm-bodied. And so we finally got a car with dual heating and air, and so we don't have to fight over that anymore.
Hallelujah.
So, hallelujah. But Cammie was a little bit cold today since it was in the 60s. It was majestic weather today.
It was nice, but coming from 100 degrees, it drops. When it drops about 35 degrees, it's a little cool.
Yeah, we almost had like a 30, 35 degree drop in a week because we almost touched 100 this week in Wichita. And today it's down to 67. So quite the dramatic drop. Yeah. And so we'll see how that plays on people's allergies and all that stuff.
Exactly.
That was kind of our weekend in a nutshell. Nothing too crazy, kind of laid back. And so it was nice.
Yeah.
And so we'll get into this episode. Excited. Like Cammie mentioned, we're going to be talking about finances. And I think the thing when you talk about finances is you have to make it lighthearted. You have to make it enjoyable. You have to make it relatable. And so we're going to kind of do our best to relay kind of how we do things, and what works for us might not work for other people, but we hope you can take something away from our journey. This is probably one of my most requested episodes when I put stuff on Instagram and messages that I've gotten as people really want us to talk about how do you live debt free, because as we've mentioned before, we don't really live by societal norms, if you will.
No.
And so living debt free is something that's not common in this day and age. And so we're kind of going to dive into that journey. And I don't think you can get into that journey without at least talking about how you grew up with money, because I think the way you do things now usually is rooted from something either in your childhood or how you grew up. And so I think it's important to address why you have your relationship with money a certain way. And so I'm going to let Cammie go first on this one and kind of talk about how you grew up with money. How'd your family handle money? Was it a topic you guys talked about? And then kind of how'd you handle money growing up?
Yeah, so basically with my family is we grew up very, I would say, pretty much middle class. I mean, we never had a ton of money. My parents always made ends meet, but there was usually never any extra, at least when we were little. I would say until we got to about middle schoolish. We always were kind of in the struggling area. And my parents were the type that they were such hard workers, both of my mom and my dad. My mom was a hairdresser. She by the time she passed, she was a hairdresser for 43 years, I think. And my dad always had a good job and always worked very, very hard. But when we were growing up, when we were really little, my mom, I can remember her telling me there was numerous times where she would go to the grocery store and she only had like $15 to spend for several days worth of food that she needed to get. And numerous times too where she would say that, there wasn't enough money to have food and stuff. And so there were times where she would make my brothers and I a lunch, and then she would just wait and eat whatever we had left on our plates, and that was her lunch. Like, so things like that. So we were never, like I said, we were definitely never rich and did not have an exuberant amount of money. But they always made ends meet. We always ate, and my parents made sure of that. We always had food on our table. It wasn't much, but we still had something and we were taken care of. So I'm very, very thankful for that. But growing up, I was the type so I started working. That is one thing my parents instilled, is a very good work ethic in my brothers and I, and just made sure that we knew the value of a dollar and knew that money doesn't grow on trees, as they say. It doesn't come easy. You have to work for it, and put your head down and you grind and you work for it, and you will get paid for it. And so growing up, I started babysitting when I was about 11, I think I was. I think I started around 10 with my mom, and then on my own when I was about 11 or 12 for a neighborhood family just right across from the street from us, and babysat them for, gosh, probably I think 5 or 6 years. And so I started making money that way. And then when I was old enough, I got a job at the baseball stadium, where Caleb also worked. He'll probably talk about that, but he worked there as well. My brothers also worked there. A lot of kids in our church youth group worked there also at the time. It was just kind of like the teenage area to work. So I worked there. I got the job when I was 13. And so I worked there for 3 summers. And then from there, yeah, I went on to my next job, and I've had a job ever since until, but every time I'm the type, like we kind of briefly mentioned in our relationship one, but I am the type where I'm always the spender. As soon as I got money growing up, it was going directly into my savings. I did not touch it. I didn't want to spend it. I wanted to save it. And so my brothers were the complete opposite growing up. As soon as they got money, it was gone. It was just, they would always find something to spend it on. And I was just like, that, guys, you should probably save some. Like, just being that, I wasn't even the oldest kid. I was the middle child. But I knew I was always had the mindset, if I really, really wanted something, I would think about it for a good, several days, weeks, months, whatever. And if I really wanted it and it was still there when I went back, then I would get it. But that didn't happen very often, because I just realized that it was worth saving more than it was actually worth to spend my money. So I saved it. But yeah, that was kind of how we grew up. And so when Caleb and I got married, I had the savings, a whole $2,000 to our name when we got married from my savings. And that was after, and growing up too, when I was a teenager, if we wanted something, we had to buy it. So like if I wanted makeup, if I wanted certain clothes, if I wanted anything extra other than what was necessary, food and certain clothing, I had to buy that out of my own pocket. And also I did not have a cell phone growing up. My older brother, John, and I got a phone to share when I was 16. So that is how Caleb and I started first texting when we had first started dating.
When her brother didn't hog the phone.
Yeah, when my brother wasn't hogging it, talking to his girlfriend, I could have the phone to text. And I could still remember that. So we did not get a phone until I was 16, because my parents obviously were like, you don't need one. I was homeschooled, so it's not like I was going to school or anything like that. And yeah, but anyway, that's kind of how I grew up.
Yeah, for me, kind of similar in a lot of ways to Cammie's story. My family grew up, you would say, middle class, the lower end of the middle class, if you will. I mean, my parents always made sure to keep us in a nice neighborhood, keep us in a good school district. And so a lot of their money just went to honestly, keeping us in that area and keeping us in this nice neighborhood. And so my parents were or have been pastors my whole life, and so we never grew up with money. That's a common misconception that pastors take a lot of money from their congregations. Maybe that's the case in some churches, but I can tell you that's not the case in ours. And so we grew up just, it's always been a smaller church. And so just not living on a big budget. My dad also worked at a retail job full time growing up because keep in mind, I'm the youngest out of technically five siblings. I have four older sisters. And so raising that many kids and trying to feed that many kids and trying to take care of a church, we just didn't grow up with a lot of money. There was a lot of times my parents were very honest with money. They would sit us down like sometimes before Christmas and say, "Hey guys, like this isn't going to be a massive Christmas with like presents this year." And I grew up on Goodwill clothes and hand-me-downs from people in the church, and my sisters did as well. And like when I was playing baseball, all that I could afford to play was like YMCA baseball. I could never afford to be like in the good leagues, and that's okay. My parents did as good as they could with what they had, and so my kind of like Cammie's parents, my parents have always been really hard workers. Like I said, my dad was a pastor and worked retail. My mom was a stay-at-home mom trying to raise a bunch of kids, and eventually, once I got into middle school / high school, she eventually started getting a job herself, and that's kind of where my family's financial journey kind of started to improve. Was my mom was finally able to generate some income, but I just grew up with not a lot of extra money. A lot of the same things as Cammie. I had to buy my own first car. I had to buy my own first cell phone. And my parents did not install a workaholic mindset in us. Like I started working at McDonald's when I was 13 years old, I think I was. It's a long story. But I started working when I was 13 just so I could get a cell phone because I wanted a cell phone so bad because all my friends in high school had one. And so started working for that. I had to buy my first car. That was like a $500 car, and it sat in the parking lot of my parents' house or the driveway because I couldn't afford the insurance on it. My parents couldn't afford to really help contribute to that. So everything I wanted, I had to pay for. And so that led to Cam and I kind of took opposite journeys from there. Cammie kind of learned to save from her upbringing, and I learned to honestly, I kind of went the opposite way, where due to the fact that I didn't get to grow up with money and due to the fact that we didn't have a lot to do extras, as soon as I got money of my own, it went it went to all the extras. I went to concerts. I went to anything I wanted to buy, I bought. Like had a massive music collection, a massive like movie collection. I went to the movie theaters all the time, and I blew money as soon as I got it. And honestly, every single week I would get my paycheck down to like 14 cents left in it. Like I knew how to just make it survive to the next week. And so it's kind of funny how you can see different ways people handle the way they grew up. Cammie took a way better path to savings. I didn't do that at all. And so, but I appreciate what my parents taught us. They taught us to work hard for what you want. Like I said, we didn't get anything handed to us. We didn't grow up with a silver spoon in our mouth by any means.
No.
Like we had to work for what we wanted, and our parents had to work hard for what they provided us. And so I'm very thankful for the upbringings that we had. Both of like I said, our families grew up together, so we kind of went through the struggle together. And so that's kind of how I grew up with a relationship with money. Like I said, up until the time Cam and I got married, I really didn't carry much in my bank account. I literally lived paycheck to paycheck.
He literally had nothing in his bank account when we got married. I had $2,000 to my name, and that was all we had when we got married.
That was. And Cammie, even before we got married, when I first got the apartment, she had to help with some of my bills and stuff because there was no way I could have afforded to live. And so we were on the struggle bus, like for real. And so we didn't have much. And so that's kind of how we started our marriage. And so Cammie, we'll get into Dave Ramsey a little bit. So Cammie grew up in Dave Ramsey. I think she talked about it in one of the other episodes. But talk about what you had to do for school.
Yeah, I think I briefly mentioned it in the previous one. But yeah, it was a requirement for my brothers and I in order to graduate high school that we had to go through the Dave Ramsey course. And at the time he had one for, actually he still does, I know, but he had one for teens. And so my dad got the video set. And so we had to sit down and we had to literally watch it. And my brothers thought it was the worst thing they could possibly do. And so, of course, they did not take it seriously at all. And me, I'm the one over here, like had my workbook, had my pencil in hand, like going through, checking off, like making sure I had everything filled in. And there was numerous times Caleb was over, because we were dating at the time. He was over at our house when my dad was like, all right, well, we got to go down and have a class. And so I was like, all right, Caleb, well, you got to come too. And he was not thrilled about that
I didn't give a crap at all about these
so
lessons.
He was not paying attention. He was on his phone or whatever, texting people. But I was paying attention. I was like listening, writing stuff down, all of that. I think I even still have the papers from when we went through it, I think. And yeah, so that was a requirement. And so we did that. And from there is when I learned even more. I knew growing up, my parents would always talk like about money, like how it was, kind of a struggle, or what things cost, or ooh, we gotta kind of watch this because this bill's coming up, or like, so I knew I was not blind to the fact that things cost money and like to live in a house costs money, bills cost money, like you have more than just your mortgage payment, like, stuff like that. I wasn't ignorant to that fact, I guess you could say. And so growing up as Caleb and I were dating and then getting ready to get engaged, that's when we had that sit down talk. And that's where I needed to make sure he understood that, because when we were dating, he did not understand that. And he was, like you said, living paycheck to paycheck. And that's when I was just like, after we'd gone through that, I had graduated high school, I was working, and then it came time and I was like, okay, like I'm ready I'm in a good financial spot. I'm ready to settle down, to get married. And Caleb was not at the time. And so that's when we had to have that little heart to heart talk, to try to get us both on the same page.
Yeah. And so I started to get my financial act in order after that talk, but I really didn't get into Dave Ramsey until about 2 to 3 years into our marriage. I don't even remember what started. I don't remember if I just randomly picked up one of his books, or if I just started engaging with his podcast or listening to his radio show. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'm the one who really started to honestly kind of kick Dave Ramsey off in our marriage. Because the thing with the Dave Ramsey course is Cammie knew it, but I wasn't actively living it. And the thing is if you and your spouse aren't on the same page with it, it's not going to be successful. Yeah. And so we really didn't save a whole lot our first couple of years of marriage. But it was like 2 years in.
Because I remember at the apartment, because we had this super crappy rundown apartment that we lived in for the first almost 2 years of our marriage. And we saved. You weren't like you weren't headstrong into like Dave or like saving, but I knew the importance of saving. Yeah. So I was the one that was pushing, like, no, we're going to put back this much each month. And like, it was something so small. I don't remember
our rent. It was such cheap rent. And so we were able to put a little bit back in that place. It was a rundown.
Well, because we wanted to get out of there as fast as we could to buy our first house, but we knew we needed to have a good chunk of money to put down on a house. Yeah. So we did.
But I wasn't intense until 2 or 3 years later. And so, like I said, I found his radio show, and that's when, honestly, like almost not that the tides turned, but I started to almost pass Cammie in the kind of, you could say, financial knowledge kind of situation. And so the Dave Ramsey, I'll kind of give you a quick rundown of what it is. He teaches 7 baby steps. Some people say Dave Ramsey's out of date. Some people say his advice isn't
realistic
or ethical, but it's not meant to. Well, it is ethical, but people say it's just not realistic, and so. But honestly, a lot of times it's just people not wanting to make the sacrifices it takes in order to do it. Because anytime you're dealing with money, it does require sacrifice a lot of time. You have to put your pride aside. You have to put the things you want aside for a limited time. And so Dave Ramsey basically has 7 baby steps. And if you want to know more about it, you can go listen to his podcast. But I'll give you the quick rundown of what it is. So the first step is to put $1,000 in your emergency fund. Emergencies are going to happen no matter what. You're going to have tires go flat in your car. You're going to have doctor's visits that are unexpected. You're going to have things like that. So in order to not knock you off the path of financial success, you always want to have $1,000 in your emergency fund to start. And so after you get that $1,000 in your emergency fund, he does what's called the debt snowball, which basically is paying off all your debt. You go from your smallest debt all the way up to your biggest debt. It doesn't matter the interest rates, and you pay them off little by little. And then as soon as you pay off one, you put the next debt or the money you're paying on that first debt onto the second debt. And then once you pay that one down, you take the money from those debts and you keep rolling it. And that's why it's called the debt snowball. And so that's baby step number 2. Baby step number 3 is to finish your emergency fund, which basically means take it from $1,000 and take it to about 6 months of living expenses. So can
three
you
to
cover
six months.
yeah, 3 to 6 months. And so can you cover your mortgage for 3 to 6 months? Can you cover bills if you were to get laid off for 3 to 6 months? And so that's step 3. Number 4 is to get to investing, which is investing 15% of your income into retirement. So that's your 401ks, your Roth IRAs, and things like that, and making sure you're investing for the future. And then step 5 is to pay off your house. Step 6 is to save for your kids' college funds. And step 7 is to live and give as generously as you want. And so we really got into those principles. Like I said, Cami started our marriage with $2,000 in the bank. So luckily we had that one. We had baby step 1 knocked out already. However, we weren't clear from debt. And so we never had a necessarily crippling amount of debt in our life. But we did have car payments. We did have stuff that we owed money to that we had to pay off. And like I said, me and Cami weren't fully on the Dave Ramsey plan because even once we got married, we financed a car together and things like that. And so we weren't perfect. We didn't have all this stuff spoon-fed to us. And we had things we had to learn. And so, like I said, we got 2 or 3 years into it. That's when we decided to start paying off our cars and deciding no longer to do car payments anymore. And like I said, we just started to live debt-free. And that's probably where most people get confused. I guess for you, talk about our debt-free journey a little bit and kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, I think also when we kind of started on that path after a couple of years, one thing when we were still at the apartment early on in our marriage is we knew it would be a short time at the apartment, and that was our time to save because we wanted to buy a house. And we obviously, I mean, we're in Kansas, we didn't want anything like crazy expensive or crazy huge or not, just a good starter home. We knew we didn't want to be in it for very long, just a couple of years until we started a family or even when we had a kid there or whatever it may be. And so we just wanted something that would just work for us, a good starter home that was going to be decent price, that type of thing. And so we started saving. And one thing about us is we never have gotten a credit card in our entire marriage. We have never, either one of us, opened one or gotten one or even applied for one in our whole marriage. And that goes for not just credit cards, but like store credit cards also. We have never done that. And so a lot of people are like, well, how did you buy a house then? And we've since then, in our 9 years of marriage, we've bought 2 houses since that without having any credit basically to our name. And so basically our philosophy is if we don't have the money for something, we don't buy it. And that's how we've lived since we first got married. And that honestly, like that, if I could give a big tip, like that would be like the best advice I could ever give is honestly, if you don't have the money for something, you don't buy it. And that's not to say if you have the money, go, blow it on that, but then you're worried about a bill you have to, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously you have to be smart about it. But also for Caleb and I, what we've done is we've set a limit, and anything over a certain amount, we communicate with each other. And it's not asking permission to buy it. It's more the fact of just being open and honest and having that communication. And that I cannot tell you enough how helpful that is in a marriage, because finances are one of the biggest, causes of divorce is your finances, because couples can't agree, or they're not on the same page, or they just don't communicate about it. And that is such a simple thing to communicate about that people just don't, because people don't want to talk about finances. People don't like to talk about money. It's uncomfortable. It's, a lot of times it's the situation of that's not where their financial situation isn't where they want to be. So they just don't want to even bring it up. Well, that's not good, especially in a marriage. And so for us, we've always been super, super open and honest about it and talked about it. And, even if it's just something simple as $15-20, we still will text each other if we're not with each other, or call and say, hey, I'm thinking about getting this. Is that okay? And like, of course, it's always been okay. I don't think we've ever said no. No, but it's just to have that open communication. That way we're not looking on our bank app and being like, why is this $50 charge coming out of our account that I have no clue what it's about? Like, it's just it eliminates any kind of fight, any kind of disagreement that may come up because we didn't talk about it or we didn't go over it with each other. And so that's basically why we do that. And it has helped so much.
That's a piece of advice that for those listening, if you are married, combine your bank accounts. You won't believe how many people I've coached. Like I said, or Cammie said earlier, we coach Dave Ramsey classes, and people reach out to us about that all the time. And that's one of the first things I ask is like, do you and your spouse share bank accounts? They're like, no, we keep them separate, or we just do all of our stuff separate. I pay these, she pay. Like, trust me, you will be on a so much better page if you can communicate and have the same joint accounts. I mean, when you get married, what's yours is hers, and what's his is hers, whatever you want to say. And so to combine your bank accounts, like it's just so much better for accountability. It's better for communication, and it just puts you on the same page. You know what's in your bank accounts. You know what you need to accomplish. You know what bills have been paid, what bills haven't been paid. And so that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is to combine your bank accounts if you are married.
Yeah. And also I will add to that is not just have the same bank account, but don't have one bank account where both of you are on it and then his bank account and her checking account. I know so many couples also that do that. That'll have their own separate accounts, but then they have a joint one and they're like, well, we do share a bank account. No. That's not the same, because you can still do a whole bunch of stuff on your end and him on his end, and you both will have no clue about it. And that's going to lead to a financial disaster. I can guarantee it. And not only that, but also that's going to lead to a lot of problems in your own marriage, not even talking finances, because you don't know what the other's doing. And so, that's a no-no. That is the biggest tip. One of them that we can give to is.
Well, and what's funny is when people talk about that, they're like, well, what about Christmas gifts? And you don't believe how many times Kim and I bought Christmas gifts and never knew what was coming. Like, there's these things called ATMs, where if you don't want people to know where you get stuff from, you can go to the ATM, get cash out. And so, or if you need to get a gift, you won't believe how many times I've Venmo'd my sisters to buy something for Cammie, or Venmo'd my mom.
Done for my family too, to get Caleb a gift. Or also when you're at the grocery store and ask if you want cash back, sometimes you can push if you're needing to get a gift. Hit yes, cash. You need some cash back, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount. If you need
don't hit cash back every time you go to the store now.
Right. But I'm just saying, if you're trying to buy a gift for your spouse and you don't want them to know, you can do that. And, it's just simple little things like that. Just, you have to think about things a little bit more, sure, but it is possible.
It is. And so we basically, like I said, we had our $1,000 in our emergency fund. We paid off all of our debt. We finished our emergency fund. And that's when, once you get past the debt phase, and once you get past your second emergency fund phase, that's when you can get into the house buying phase.
Yes.
So we bought our first house, and we started to pay that off.
We should probably talk about how we did that without having any credit.
Yeah, so that's probably a question we get probably the most is when Cam and I tell people we live debt free, they're always like, "How did you buy a house without credit?" Because we've had so many people trying to tell us, "Oh, you have to have so many credit cards in order to buy a house. You have to have a certain credit score to buy a house. You have to have XYZ to buy a house." And I can tell you that that's not true. Like, just based off Cam and I's experience. So what you have to do is, if you want to buy a house and you have little to no credit, is you have to do what's called manual underwriting. And basically you have to find someone willing to do it. Dave Ramsey has people who he recommends. I actually just found, it was our realtor at the time when we were looking to buy, we asked our realtor, we were like, look, we really don't have any credit. Like, literally, I think we had like one car payment that was like towards our credit. And so it was very minimal. Cammie had none. The car was under my name. So Cammie had zero credit to her name. And so we asked our realtor, we're like, hey, how do you recommend us getting this house? And she recommended a guy here in town where we live. And basically what he does is, instead of looking at your credit score, he looks at your situation. So he looks at your debt to income ratio. He had me send him a bunch of pay stubs so he could see like how much money we had. He had to give him access to our bank account so we could see how much like liquid cash we had. And instead of just looking at my credit score and saying, yeah, you're good, he looks at my income and Cammie's income that she was providing, and basically figures out what he can afford to give us. And honestly, like, both times we bought a house, we've gone through him, and he's basically given us whatever limit we wanted. Like, because generally our debt to income ratio is better. And so you want to get money into savings. That's a big key. And then you want to make sure you don't have a massive debt to income ratio. Otherwise, it's going to make it a struggle. But you shouldn't be buying a house if you have a massive debt to income ratio, because emergencies happen even more once you buy a house. And so That's kind of how we bought a house. It's called manual underwriting. It's not a common practice. Most banks are going to tell you they won't do it, but you can find people to do it.
What is his title, like personal lender?
Yeah, he's like a personal lender. Yeah, and so he works for a bank, but it's not like one of the big banks like Bank of America or one of those big ones. And so, like I said, he looks more at specific finances, and he helped us get it. And he's awesome to work with, and he's helped us get both of the houses that we've bought, and made it really easy, made it really seamless. And like I said, the only thing on our credit to this day now is our house. That's it. And so some people say, well, you live debt free, but you have a house, so you have a mortgage, right? And yes, we do have a mortgage. And so the way Dave Ramsey categorizes a house is, yes, it's technically debt, but 95% of the time, especially in the last couple of years, the house is an investment because it gains value. And when you pay your mortgage, a large chunk of it's going back to paying yourself. And so, yes, you could say we have a debt tied to our name, but the only debt we have tied to our name is our house. So that's why we claim we live debt free, because we don't see our house as debt. Dave Ramsey doesn't see houses as debt. As long as they're done right, they're considered an investment, because you're generally going to profit more on your house over that time. Then you're not just going to lose it like you would if you're paying rent. And so that's a little bit about our housing journey. Now, Cammie's always been really big on this, and I am too. One thing I love about Dave is the very top of his budget sheet when he teaches you how to budget is giving. And I think we probably should have started with this. I think giving has to be the root or the heart between getting your finances in order. So kind of talk them through how we do our giving, like where we prioritize it, how we do it, and so on and so forth.
So giving for us, giving can look different for a lot of people. For us, we are Christian, and so for us, giving we consider is tithing, and that's tithing to our church. And so that's 10%, and that is 10% of what we make as a whole, not just what Caleb makes or not just what I make. It's 10% of whatever we both are bringing to the table for that month or biweekly, however we get paid. And so literally even down to, if we get $10 for from Caleb's grandma for Christmas or birthday or something like that, small, that is considered a gift, and that is considered income. And so we consider that into the whole as well. We don't just pick and choose here what we're going to give off of or whatnot. And so that is something that my parents really drilled into me growing up, is you tithe. Like you tithe, you give it to God, because that is not your money, it's God's money, and God's the one that blessed you with it. And so you give back to him what's his. And so that's something that I just grew up like knowing was super, super important. And that's something that I wanted to make sure was very important in our marriage as well. And another thing that Caleb and I talked about, and I I definitely told him, I was like, this is something I won't budge on, is we are going to tithe from every single paycheck we get. Everything that comes into our house, we're going to tithe off of it. And we did. And to this day, we have never not tithed. We've never missed a paycheck. We've never not tithed on, anything. That we've always, as soon as we get, it's just like, I hate to phrase it this way because it's not, but it's like another bill, if you will. As soon as we get paid, I look and see, okay, like this is how much we made from the last 2 weeks. Okay, what's our tithe going to be? And I figure that up, and I pay that tithe as soon as we get paid, every single paycheck, because then you don't even know that you had it, basically. I mean, you don't even miss it because it's 10%, and 10% sounds like such a small amount, but then you get a paycheck and you look and you're like, oh my gosh, 10% of like, $2,000 is like, that's kind of a lot, but it's not. It's just, you don't even miss it. You send it first thing. Like for us, we have an app with our church now that we can give on. So I just put it in the app, send it off, and that's it. It's done.
Well, and the reason we do it right when we get our paycheck, so you're not tempted to spend it. Because a lot of times, a lot of people are hesitant to give, and so they'll kind of wait. Well, let me pay all this other stuff off first. Let me do all this stuff, but it needs to be your first fruits. Especially if you're living, as the Bible calls it to, if you're a believer, is to give your first fruits, and that means you're giving the first. You're giving the best to the best. Yep. And so, and like I said, if you get to the point where you get to the second Friday from your paycheck and you're getting like you're not going to tithe, you're going to spend it on something else. And so, I just think it's important to start with a uh, whether you're not a Christian, a charitable mindset. If you're a Christian, just a tithing mindset, and getting in the routine of that. And I think as couples need to really get on that same page too.
Yes.
So many times couples were one, like Kim was talking, one person will tithe, the other one's hesitant or not on the train yet, but you both have to have a cheerful giving heart, and not doing it with hesitancy. The Bible says to be a cheerful giver. And so I just challenge you to sit down and talk with your spouse about that. Like if you aren't on the same page with giving, if you're not giving at all, like find ways you can be charitable, find ways that you can give, whether that's to your church, whether that's to a homeless ministry, whether that's to whatever your heart is called to give to. Just find a way to give. I think that's super important.
Yeah, for sure. And I truly believe, I know for a fact that is one of the big reasons why my parents growing up, especially when we were real little and it was very tough finance wise for my parents, that is one thing they said they never stopped doing was tithing. And my mom, I can still remember this day, she goes, I know for a fact that is the biggest reason why we had random, just like the most random blessings is what she would call it. Because like one time they were at church, and I remember they said going to church, they didn't have like hardly any money left for like the week, and but church was important. They needed to tithe, and so they were taking it. They went to church, and so they were for sure going to tithe and stuff, and they did. And when they got back in the car, somebody had given my dad, I think it was, an envelope of money, and they looked, and it was like, I think it was $1,000 total of like $100 bills or something, and they don't know who it was, but somebody had given it to him anonymously. And like that was such a huge blessing for, especially back then, $1,000. It was so much money back then for my family. And like that helped so much. And another instance where my mom, she was always like the most generous lady. Like she would give you the shirt off of her back. She would give you like if she could cook for you, she would. If she could give you anything, she would. Like she just always had that heart of like giving. And one time, I remember one of her friends and her kids wanted to come over when we were real little, and my mom was like, "Well, that's fine, but like, I don't really have any food." Like, and we didn't have any money to go to the store. And at this time, growing up, we lived about 20 minutes outside of town to go like grocery shopping and stuff. And so my mom didn't want to spend the gas to have to go in, and she didn't really have any money to even buy anything. And it was like and she just went and she just prayed, and she's like, God, I don't know what to do. But I need your help. Like, and that type of thing. And within, I think it was just a couple of hours or something, there was a box left on our front doorstep, and she went and looked, and it had the most random food in there. But like my mom said, she had a box of spaghetti noodles, but she didn't have any sauce. And like she had like certain things, but she didn't have enough to like make a meal. But in this box was like one jar of pasta sauce, no noodles, and then like a bunch of other random things in order to complete like a meal that she had the other stuff for. So it was like the most random stuff. But I say all that to say, and I know those are like really random stories, but it's just like stuff that I'd say, like when you are faithful in the little, God will provide. And that's something that I saw growing up time and time again with my parents and my family, and something that really just instilled in me that heart as well to always tithe and to always make sure that is the first thing we do, because that is God's money. He's the one that blessed us with it. And so we are for sure going to give it back to him and, be faithful with that tithe that he has given to us.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing that Kim and I believe, is that none of our money is ours. Like It's all God, and God could technically request 100% of it from us if he wanted. But he's a gracious God who wants to give us good things, and he only asks for 10% of it. And 10% is just the start. And that's just like, we still believe in giving to missionaries, and we still believe in giving to different ministries and stuff like that if the heart desires to. And I just challenge you guys, like I said, to get into that mode of giving, because I do believe that when you give, it comes back to you. Now, I'm not saying it's always going to come back to you in finances, but it could come back to you in health. It could come back to you in job opportunities. It could come back to you in just joy. And so many times people overlook that. They think that money has to come, if I give, it's going to come back to me. And yes, it can come back in finances, but I think it can just come back in joy. It can come back in peace. And that stuff you can't put a dollar amount on. And so it's really important. And so we kind of walked through a little bit of our debt journey. Like I said, the steps are to save $1,000, pay off your debt, extend your emergency fund. And then once you get past extend your emergency fund, the last steps are done together, which that's investing for your retirement, and that's paying off your house and your kids' future college loans if they choose to go that route. And then the last is to live and give generously. But we're called to still give even through the beginning portions. And so the last part, you just get to extend that giving. And so I guess for the last few minutes of this, we'll talk kind of about some extra advice. We've talked a little bit about advice on the way. And so I guess I'll give a piece of something. This is probably going to rub most people, or this is why most people give up on the journey earlier than others, is because Dave Ramsey recommends, and something that I've had to learn the hard way, is to stay the heck out of restaurants. Like stay the heck away from fast food
when you're on your
when you're on your debt journey. So when you're in baby steps 1, 2, and 3, when you're still in your debt phase, you're not supposed to really see the inside of a restaurant, according to him. Now, for someone like me, I am a fast food junkie. If Cammy would let me, I would eat out breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, that's how much I love eating out. And so, and I did live that way for actually even a little bit into our marriage. I lived that way until Kim and I kind of started to get more into Dave Ramsey, and Cammy was basically like, Caleb, either A, I'm going to give you like $20 a week, and that's all you're going to get for fast food, or B, like I'm going to pack your lunches. And I'm not the type to get up early and pack my own lunches, which is why I was always going out to eat for breakfast and lunch. And so I took him, I was like, look, I'm not going to get up early and make a lunch. I just know that's not in my capabilities to do or mindset to do. And Cammy was like, fine, I'll pack your lunches for you. And so Cammy started packing. This is when I worked on site. Cammy started packing my lunches for me, and that literally saved so much money. And so, like, you think about it, when fast food's even more expensive now, like you're talking almost $10 a meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and $10 is the cheap way out. So that's $30 a day times 31 days. Like, you know what you could do with that extra money? Like, that's almost probably over $1,000 right there that people literally eat. Like, and I think that's the hardest thing is I've had so many people reach out to me and say, like, Caleb, I want to get on the debt-free journey, or hey, Caleb, like, I'm struggling with finances, like, can you help me out? And I'll be like, how much are you spending on eating out? And that's when that's always my first question is, how much do you spend eating out? And people always go, oh. Like, because that's the thing that people don't want to sacrifice. And that's what I was talking about, is when you're on your debt journey, you have to be willing to sacrifice. Yes, I love a big old double quarter pounder with cheese as much as the next person. Like, but is that $10, $12 double quarter pounder with cheese worth risking my retirement on? No, it's not. Is it worth saving it for my kids? No, it's not. And so that's one thing that that probably gets Dave Ramsey in the most like people disagree with, and most people disagree, like in our debt journey, is we love to eat out. Like, I'm not saying we don't now, but we're past the debt phase of our journey. But when you're in the debt phase, you should really just focus on necessities and debt. Necessities and debt. That's what you pay off so you can get that freedom. And so that would be a piece of advice I have. So
I think even just to go off of that before we go on to something else, I think even with that is people that aren't necessarily in a necessarily debt journey, they would say, but are just wanting to save more or complaining because, you know, they don't have money at the end of the paycheck or whatever, is so often you see those people that are talking like that. What do they do? What do they have in their hand? They have a Starbucks drink. They have what's here, a famous gas station here we have is Quick Trip, and they're known for their drinks and, Quick Trip foods and stuff like that. And they'll have a Quick Trip drink or, snack stuff that they just stopped and got at the gas station or whatever. And it's just like little things like that. You don't think a couple dollars here, $5 for coffee here, like you don't think that adds up. But if you're doing that 4 to 5, even 3 to 5 times a week, that adds up very, very quickly. And that's something that I have always been super big on as well. And I love an iced coffee just as much as the next girl, but I have to limit myself to 1 a week max, usually. On a good week, I might do 2. If I find like, if there's like a good sale, like a deal, like the coffee shop's doing like a, $3 medium coffee, or I have like points on an app. I have this app that I use, and Caleb knows that I scan receipts. And so any receipt that we get, I scan it, and it builds up my points, and then it turns into gift cards. It's really awesome, actually. If you would like the link for it, this is not like a sales pitch or anything, but if you'd like the link for it, let me know. I don't think I have it linked anywhere on my socials, so you can DM me on Instagram and I can send you the link for it. But it's awesome. And I have literally gotten, oh, I don't know, well over probably $200 in Starbucks gift cards just from using this app, from scanning receipts, like legit. And that's my Starbucks fund.
Yeah, and what's funny is Cami said she likes her Starbucks, and even Ren knows it. We'll be walking down the grocery store, and she'll see like the Starbucks. I think it's a mermaid. I think like the Starbucks mermaid or whatever their little design is, logo. And she'll be like, "Mom, that's the coffee you like."
She's like, "Mommy's coffee? You're gonna get coffee, Mommy?
You like coffee, Mom?" And but Cami doesn't pay for it, like out of our account. It's always usually with receipts that she gets and things like that. And so that's one thing that a lot of people, like I said, they aren't willing to put their pride aside. Because a lot of people say, well, if you're in your debt journey, you should be able to still enjoy nice things. And you can find other ways to enjoy things without having to spend ridiculous amounts of money on it. You can make stuff at home. Like, believe it or not, you can do that. Like there's like when it comes to movies and like going to, I don't know, sports events or concerts, there are free things you can find around your town to go do. When Cam and I were dating and didn't have a whole lot of money, we would just go walk around a park here in town and just spend a couple hours there just walking around. And so there are things you can do that are enjoyable. There is plenty of stuff your city has that's for free. And so you can make it happen. Yes, it requires sacrifice. I'm not going to say it's easy. It sucks, like having to put that stuff aside. But you have to sacrifice your present to build for a better future. And I know that sounds like a cheesy line, but that's what I always think about. Like when I'm buying McDonald's, does this 10, 12 bucks I'm spending, is that worth it for the now just to fill my stomach with junk? And yes, I love it. Or what could that go to in the future? Like how much, if that was invested or saved, could that go to? And so that's important too. And then another thing that people probably are curious about is how we paid for our kids, like with hospital and when it comes to childbirth, because I know medical bills are what puts a lot of people.
Medical bills are a huge one too. So for midwifery care, what we did with Ren, with having a home birth, that is one thing that I am so thankful for. Midwife care is, it is cheaper. Well, okay, let me put it this way. Depending what insurance you have and what plan you have for your insurance, it is cheaper to do a midwife route. At least for us, it was. We have a super high deductible for our insurance because we just never go to the hospital. We never go to doctors. Like we don't ever have to use that. So we have a super high, always have medical deductible. And so when I got pregnant with Ren and we started looking and I wanted to do home birth anyway, the cost was a big factor into why Caleb finally agreed to it also, as we mentioned briefly before in the other episode. And before I was even, I think, barely into my third trimester, maybe, we had Ren's birth already paid for completely.
Well, and a cool thing about that was, if you haven't looked into this with your company, check it out. But my company provides an HSA card. And basically, for the first few years we had it, like Kim and I never even touched it. We didn't even know it really existed. We didn't really know what to spend it on. And so we never touched it. And with my company, it rolls over year over year. And so honestly, like with Ren's birth, we had just a bunch of my HSA. And I think we paid off like probably 70% of her probably.
At least 50.
At least 50%, with my HSA card that was just sitting there. And so you might check and see if your company offers an HSA option. It's usually tax-free. Usually your company will contribute depending on your plan. And then also you can contribute tax-free to it if you want to add additional to it.
So we did that for her. And then it started building and building and building a little bit more by the time I got pregnant with Bridger. And I'm planning on using the midwife route. And so we started paying on that as well as his birth. And we did get him paid off too. And so he was paid for. And then, of course, I think it was just like less than a month after we paid him off his birth before he was born is when I went into labor spontaneously and had him 6 weeks early. And we had a big old hospital
medical bills. He definitely maxed out his deductible.
For sure.
Like I didn't ever calculate all of his bills, but I think without insurance, his bills would have been like $500,000 or $600,000. And so it was just insane stuff. But luckily, we have our emergency funds, and we put that towards his medical bills. And so that's just what you got to do. That's what those emergency funds are for. Is when things like that come up, you pay them down, and you do your best to build that emergency fund back up. And so that's a little bit about us. And then I guess the last thing we'll talk about and then is our cars. This is another thing that isn't a popular opinion with the way we live. Is Cammy and I don't necessarily believe in having the nicest cars. until honestly about 2 months ago, Cammy and I have always driven old clunkers. Like, I have driven multiple cars to 200,000 miles. I have literally driven in the junkiest of cars you could ever own. Like, I've had cars where the doors wouldn't even shut. I've had cars where, like I said, they were wrecked and the fenders and bumpers were broken off. Like, you have to put your pride aside. You don't look cool in these cars.
Yeah, for sure.
But here's the cool thing. You don't have a car payment. Like, I get so amazed, and if this is you, I'm so sorry, but I get so amazed when people are paying $500, $600, $700 a month for their car payments. Like, I just can't fathom that. And then they wonder where your money goes. It's like, it's sitting in your garage, like, and you're not even living in it. Like, some people's car payments are like almost their mortgage or their rent. And so, that's one thing that Kim and I are really big on is driving just older vehicles, and we pay them off in cash, and we just drive them literally about till their wheels fall off. And finally, just in the last couple months, we did finally get a new to us car. New to us. So we usually drive these old cars like from the 90s or the early 2000s. But we actually just got a deal on a 2019, and it's got third row seating, and it's finally a bougie car. Like I said, we have dual heating and air, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean,
it's a family car.
It's a family car.
I don't know how it's not, bougie it can be.
When you're used to driving cars that have no bumpers and
it's bougie for us.
Like, it's bougie for us. It's not bougie for most people, but it's bougie for us. And so, but we just paid it off in cash. And then, like I said, what you do is when you use that cash, it sucks to see it leave your account, but then you build it right back up to where it was. And so, that's another thing is we don't believe in car payments. And so, we don't have medical debt. We don't have one big thing that Cami and I didn't do was neither one of us went to college. And so I will say that was a huge benefit.
Yes.
I know a lot of people struggle with the student debt crisis and how to handle that, but you would still just put that into your baby steps if that's something you dealt with. For Cami and I know neither one of us at that age were interested in going to college. And so, and I say luckily, like, I really wanted to go at the time. But I just knew I would have flunked out if I went, and I didn't want I didn't want the student loan debt. And so, we really were blessed with not having student loan debt. And so that really helped us on our financial journey as well. But if you are in that boat, don't give up on it. Don't just say, well, I know so many people with student loan debt will just say, well, it is what it is. It's never going to go away. But, like, that's not the mindset to have. Like, you have to have, Dave Ramsey calls it gazelle intensity, where no matter what the debt is, whether it's hospital bills or student loans or car loans or even your mortgage, like, is have gazelle intensity to pay it off. Like, go after it with all you got. Like, if someone asks you hey, do you want to go to the baseball game tonight? You know it's going to cost you $30 or $40. You have to sometimes say no, like, and put that aside so you can pay off that debt. And you have to put fun aside for a little bit. You have to put and say, hey, and actually, I want to talk about them for the last thing. Is Cam and I have two best friends. And I want to share their story a little bit. I didn't even ask them permission, so hopefully they forgive us for it. But we have two best friends. I'll even call them out by name. Their name's Kayla and Brandon. And I love their story. I love their journey. I'll let you start it. And if you want to talk about it a little bit. And
well, it's not really my story to share, but I'll just share the brief synopsis of it. Basically, they both had student loan debt, and then she had a bunch of credit card debt from traveling over the country or out of the country, I should say, while she was in college, and racked up a ton of debt. Most of the debt was with that. And so then when they early on first got married, they had about $89,000 of debt that they were wanting to pay off, because they obviously did not want to go through marriage with that, especially starting out. And so we met together, and she was new to the Dave Ramsey process and kind of what all that meant and all that. And we hadn't started yet teaching classes, but we had that's when we were really getting into it more again, and Caleb for the first time. And so we met with them and just kind of started getting together and just kind of helping and cheering and
maybe
being there,
cheering them on.
Pretty much being there if they had any questions, but just basically cheering them on and encouraging them and with their journey. And within, I think it was less than 18 months, they paid it off, every bit of it.
Almost $90,000 in debt. Paid off in less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years.
Like, so for people who say it's impossible, it's not impossible.
No.
But if you talk to them, then they will tell you it was not easy. Like they went
Yeah.
down to one car, they went down to one
cell
cell phone. Which imagine that being married, having your own jobs, and having to go down to one
Yep.
cell phone. Like they literally went down to beans and rice, basically. And the reason I say it is I'm so proud of them because like this is still one of the most touching things they ever did. There was one time we wanted to go on like a double date with them or something.
It was Christmas time.
Or it was around Christmas time, and Kayla and Brandon messaged us and they said, "Hey, we don't really have money to do gifts this year, but we want to do something instead. So come over to our house tonight, and we have something for you guys." And so we went over to their house, and they had prepped this home cooked meal, and it was pizza, and it was like, but it wasn't just like, it wasn't DiGiorno's. It was like actual like homemade pizza with nice mozzarella and like
homemade
sauce and they went all out for us. And honestly, I still tell people that story to this day that it was one of the most touching gifts I ever got because it wasn't about the price tag on it. Yeah. It wasn't about how expensive their gift. It was literally just, hey, we're really working on our financial journey, but we still want to do something. And so this is a gift from our heart to you. And so I appreciate Kayla and Brandon and what they do. And they're still, as far as I know, living the good journey. And so, but they're a perfect example to say it's possible. Yeah. Like that's why I wanted to end with that story was $90,000 paid off in like, it was 16 or 18 months. I forget what it was, but in less than 2 years. And most people would say, I don't even make it, but they literally worked like 2 or 3 jobs a piece. Yeah. And like I said, they didn't
like, it wasn't easy by any means. It wasn't fun for them. No. They didn't enjoy it. And that's the thing. A lot of people don't want to start this journey. They don't want to do it because it's hard. It's not fun. I just don't want to do that. Well, of course you don't. Nobody wants to work 2 and 3 jobs. Nobody wants to not see their spouse much because you're working so much. Nobody wants to miss out on social things and social events and not be able to go get a Starbucks when you want it or go to the movies when you want or, go out to eat or whatever. But if you are truly wanting to get out of the situation that you're in with finances and change it for the better and change it for your future and for your family's future and your kids' future, those are the things you have to do in order to make a change. Like nothing changes if nothing changes. And I know that's such a cliche statement and quote or whatever, but it is so true. You can't just keep going on the same rat race that you've been going in circle and expecting something to change. Nothing is going to unless you make a big change like that. And that was what they needed to make the change to get out of debt. And they did. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't fun for them. It wasn't enjoyable. They numerous times wanted to quit, wanted to give up, but they didn't. And they made it in such a short time. Like it probably felt like forever for them. But like we on the other end of it, like watching them go through it, like, whoa, like that was so fast. Like, yeah, it motivated us to just be even more intense in our journey of saving and doing the things that we want to do to reach our goals. And so it's just like, you put your head down and you go like on stuff like this. And you will be shocked at how fast you get there and reach that goal. And then you set another goal and you just keep going until you reach all of your goals that you want. And then, yeah, like, especially with debt-free living, like then you get to live like no one else, just like Dave says, because it's so true. Like living debt-free allows you so many endless opportunities. Like we were able to save up and go to Ireland for 10 days and spend what we wanted to spend, see what we wanted to see, do what we wanted while we were there because we had that money set aside for that trip specifically. And we knew it was for that trip. We could spend this amount and we came home and I still think had like $500 left from that trip that we didn't spend just because we didn't want to. Like there was nothing else we wanted to spend it on. And so it's like little things like that, like not saying that to brag or anything, but just debt-free living allows you so much opportunity that you don't have when you're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. And so I think that's a good way to wrap up. Like, trust me, if the kid who only had 14 cents in his bank account can get to a point, you can do it too.
Yes.
If Kayla and Brandon, who had that much money in debt, can do it, you can do it too. And so, and if you ever need advice, you feel free to reach out. Yeah. Like, I'm not a professional, I'm not certified or anything, but I love to help coach people through that. And I would be happy to walk you through, or if you're ever interested in a financial peace class, Cam and I do them periodically. Just reach out if you're interested. And we'd love to share just more of what we know and what we've learned along the way. And so, got anything in closing before we wrap up?
no, just basically what you said. If you have any questions, even just simple ones that you just aren't sure about or whatever it's pertaining to finances or Dave Ramsey or anything like that, feel free to, message us, leave it on our podcast Instagram. It's the Hive podcast, 2 underscores after podcast. On Instagram, leave us a comment. We'll always, as soon as the episode airs, we'll post a post in that on that page. So feel free to comment under there if you have any questions, or send a DM to that page or our personal pages, either one. But yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and then make sure you like, subscribe, and refer this podcast to your friends. Leave us a review, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.
Have a blessed week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.